What's up, Crosspoint students? If we've not had the opportunity to meet, my name is Ryan, and I get to be the student pastor at our Franklin campus. Today, we're continuing in our series, And It Was Good. So today, let's start with a weird question. What is your most used emoji? Your all-time favorite? Because they are so convenient. Sometimes text, like somebody texts you and you don't know how to respond. What do? Like it's emoji time, like it's thumbs up. It's the crying laughing face. It's the sideways laughing emoji. Like it's the green face sick emoji. These are great for when you don't know how to respond. Or my favorite is the shrug emoji. Like this is my go-to emoji for just about anything. So what do you want for dinner? Shrug emoji. What was our math homework? Shrug emoji. Like how do you spend 6 hours scrolling on TikTok? Shrug emoji. Like basically when I don't know what to say or how to help or what to do next, the shrug emoji is my answer. And honestly, when I was thinking about what we're going to talk about today, I thought of this emoji too. For the past few weeks, we've been talking about injustice and how we just wish somebody somewhere would do something. And when I think about all the injustice in the world, or even just all the injustice we've been talking about here at church, I feel like this emoji, like shrug emoji. Like, what do I do? What can I do? And what's something that will actually make a difference when it comes to injustice? And just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's define the word injustice. When you hear people talk about justice, it simply means something that is right, fair, or equal. Well, injustice is the opposite of that. So when we talk about injustice, we're talking about the things in our world that are unfair, unequal, or not right. So let's pause for a minute. What are some of the injustices that you see in the world around you? Like you probably named a lot of injustices. People getting bullied at school, that's injustice. Victims of human trafficking, that's injustice. Families in poverty, that's injustice. People being treated differently because of their race or ethnicity, that's injustice. And of course, the list could go on and on and on. When you think about it this way, chances are you can see plenty of areas of injustice in our world. And if you're honest, that probably makes you think something like, wow, that's a lot of terrible things happening in the world. Somebody should really do something about all that. And so far, we all agree. We all get that. There's a need for somebody's to do something. But I want to pay attention to what I'm about to say next, because it's literally the point of the series. And it could be a phrase that passes right through your mind, having no effect, or it could change the course of your life. So here we go. You are somebody who could do something. You are somebody who could do something. Now, maybe you hear that phrase and you feel excited, challenged, or even inspired. You're ready to jump in and do the work, like put me in, coach, let's get this thing started. If that's you, that's great. But keep listening, because I want you to see that the work isn't easy. It's not a one and done battle. And so many people, including some of you and some of our leaders, have spent years fighting against the things like racism, poverty, and bullying. And you know that the work isn't easy or it's not fast. So all of us who are ready to do something have to be ready for the long haul. Or maybe you're still feeling like this shrug emoji because you realize that it's emotionally, mentally, and even spiritually exhausting to deal with and fight against the long list of injustices happening in our world. As much as we're talking and praying about injustice, the reality is to you, and it truly feels like one of those problems that we just can't solve. So maybe you're thinking, injustice has always happened, and it's still happening. So is there really hope of changing it? Like shrug emoji. Like maybe you're wondering how you, just one person, can make a difference in some huge problems like racism, human trafficking, bullying, poverty, and so much more. Is it even possible for one person in middle or high school to make a difference in anything in a meaningful way? Or maybe you're so tired of talking about it and trying to explain to people who don't seem to care that you wonder, like, is it even worth it trying anymore? Like, will people ever care as much as I do? Or maybe you've experienced injustice for so long that you wonder if saying anything or doing anything is really going to make a difference, because it hasn't so far. So why would we do it now? Like shrug emoji, like all of that. I totally get it, because you're right. Standing up and doing something about injustice isn't easy. It is overwhelming, and it's something that feels like somebody bigger or stronger or older or more powerful should be doing something. It feels like somebody needs to do something about. Well, remember what we said, you are somebody. So to get started, we're going to look at some words from a guy named James. What's interesting about James is that he was actually the brother of Jesus. Can you imagine growing up in the same family as Jesus? Of course, it must not have helped that Jesus is literally God in human form. And for those who have siblings, like, you can probably feel for James. What's interesting is that after Jesus died and was raised back to life, James got more involved in the ministry that his brother was all about. He went from being mostly absent from Jesus' ministry to being the guy traveling the world and telling others about his brother. Like, what changed? Well, my guess is when what your brother said would happen comes true and he dies and comes back to life, it makes sense to believe that he is who he says he is, that he believed that his brother, Jesus, was actually the Son of God. And this is one of the reasons that we know the resurrection actually happened, because Jesus' own brother believed that he died and he came back to life. So James went on to write a letter to a group of Christians who were facing severe injustice, and he challenged them by saying this. In James 2:15, it says, "Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. And if one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it?" When you put it that way, it sounds pretty heartless. But you know what? If we're honest, I think that's what we're all tempted to do sometimes. When faced with this hugeness of a problem that we don't know how to solve, we often just settle for saying or posting something and doing nothing. When you see someone we know struggling to have their needs met, we might say, well, pray for them. And we probably do. But of course, we don't want to get in their business, and it kind of stops there. We don't know what else to do. And this, by the way, isn't a teenager thing, like, it's a human thing. Every adult in this room feels the temptation to hold back when it comes to injustice. And don't get me wrong here. Thinking about it is good. And we started this series off by saying that you have to see injustice to do something about it. And praying is powerful and all that is good. But if our doing something stops there, then we have missed what it means to follow Jesus. You see, following somebody means that you do the kind of thing that they would do. And Jesus was all about doing something about injustice. And maybe you've heard about how he spoke for the poor, cared for the sick, hung out with the people who were outcast, and confronted leaders who were treating people unfairly. Did Jesus offer his words? Absolutely. But he also offered his actions. He lived in a way that showed the world what it looks like to value people as followers. And we can do the same. So let's look at an example of this found in John chapter 6, verses 1 through 13. And notice what Jesus does. In this passage, Jesus had a crowd that was following him because of some of the miracles that he had performed with healing the sick. And Jesus crosses to the sea to the other side, and notice what it says in verse 5. It says that when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. And Philip answered him, It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for these people to have a bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many? Jesus said, have the people sit down. And there was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. And Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish. And when they had all had enough to eat, he said to disciples, gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted. So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. So let's pause here. Like, what stands out to you about this story? I'm sure you all pointed out some amazing truths in that story. As we wrap up today, let me point out a few truths that we should all take notice about. See, we see Jesus doesn't just offer words, but he provided for their needs. This miracle is covered in the other gospels as well. And in one of the accounts, it says that Jesus saw the crowd and had compassion on them. He knew they were hungry and in need of food, and Jesus desired to meet their needs. This should be a lesson to us, and it sounds a lot like what Jesus said, that we are called to do more than just have words for people. We should be like Jesus and seek to do something about injustice that we see around us. Another thing we see here is that together we can make a bigger impact. Like, I love this story because you see so many people get involved. Like, Jesus asked Philip the question about where to get bread. And I love the scripture states that Jesus already knew what he was going to do, but he still asked Philip. Notice Andrew. He found the boy with the 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And there's the boy with the 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. The disciples sit the people down. Jesus blessed the food. The disciples gathered up the food. See, together we can make a bigger impact. And if we had time, we could look at Acts and see how God uses the church together to make a huge impact. In the same way, Jesus is calling us, you, me, your small group, our student ministry, our church, to all come together to make a difference in the world around us. And the last thing I want to point out is it's something we see with the boy with the 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He just gives what he has, and Jesus takes it and blesses it to meet the needs of all the people. See, the boy could have looked at his 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish and said, man, there's no way this is going to feed 5,000 men. And what some theologians estimate is around 20,000 people. In the same way, sometimes we can look at the injustices in the world and say, hey, one person can't make a difference in this. But I want you to notice what God is calling you to do. See, notice this. He does the super and you do the natural. He never intended for the boy to have to feed all those people. He never intended for the disciples have to buy all the food for all those people. Jesus knew what he was going to do. He just invited them to play a part. And they did the natural, and then he did the supernatural. See, all you and I have to do is to take what God has already given us and put it in the hands of Jesus and let him do the supernatural. We could say it this way: worship with dirty hands. Jesus isn't asking you to be Superman or Wonder Woman. He's just asking you to do something, for you to use what he has given you, your time, your resources, your hands, and ask him and trust him to do the extraordinary. So how do we impact injustice? Right where we are with what Jesus has given us. Remember, he does the super and we do the natural, and we can always make a bigger impact together. And this isn't something we just want to talk about. Serve the City is coming up in a few weeks, so talk to your small group leader and sign up to make a difference together. But we don't want to wait for next week. In fact, we're all going to have an opportunity to make a difference together. We're going to use what he has given us and trust him to make a difference in extraordinary ways. So we all have the opportunity to help fight the injustice of food insecurities in our city. So I'm going to ask your student pastor to come back up and let's do something to make a difference together.